Welcome back, everybody. This is, if you were wondering if we're still alive, we are.
We're fucking alive. We took a break with everybody, and we are back better than ever.
Yeah, a lot of changes, a lot of adjustments, but thank you for not abandoning us, and now we're here to stay.
Yeah, we had people still listening in, like, and looking at our videos and everything. So thank you, and being active on our socials. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
But we are back better than ever because we have quite the guest. You know her?
One of it. We love her. You love her.
You love her. You know her. We have.
She's always like our most popular episodes of the year.
Yeah, exactly. So like we wanted to start this year off with a bang, and who better to share that moment with than Miss Jordan Shomer, your resident
your astrologer
friendly astrologer friend. We're so excited for you to hear what she has to say because she dropped some bombs, some knowledge bombs, some good, some bad, but like, well, you know what I mean? That's life.
You know, it gives, it's really insightful and, you know, can prepare us to have some tools ready to make it through this year, which doesn't sound like it's going to be a bad year, but there's some things to take note of. So without further ado, let's jump in. Welcome back to SOS after a long winter's nap.
Woo!
We're back.
And Jordan.
Jordan Shomer.
I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you, Jordan. This is like our favorite way to start the year, and both of us, it has no question. It was like, if Jordan can do our top of the year interview, that's the one, because you know, we need to know what we're in for.
We want her at the top of the year, the bottom of the year, the middle. Year. We just want a whole sandwich of Jordan, essentially.
And listen, I love a sandwich.
I have to say, I need another little private 101 with you again, Jordan, because I'll have to remind our audience, I had one with her at the beginning of last year of 2021. And I kid you not, everything you said was going to happen in my life for the year happened.
Oof. My God. Okay. We clearly need to catch up.
And all the advice that you had given me, I took, and it was for the better.
Wow.
So just a little heads up to our guests is like, this is why we take Jordan seriously, because she's the real deal.
She's
I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
Not to mention your eerily accurate statement the week before George Floyd. So
yeah.
You really you're tapped into something bigger than us, and you're very eloquent with how you communicate it. And you also, I just feel like you, it's not generic statements, or you just tune in with the people you're talking to or the person you're talking to in such a authentic way. That's just very, very powerful.
Well,
so
it's funny because, and this is like kind of a tangent, but I also feel like it resonates to my, my work with astrology. On Instagram, like when you have a professional account, they give you like little titles that you can choose from, and they have astrologist, which is not correct. And so because that is the title that they offer, I'm like, I can't identify with that because it's not the right way. So I kind of was being cheeky when I first set up my professional account, and I labeled myself as a translator. And now I am like, that is literally what I am. It's like, it's not about me or like my take on things. I just feel like I have found a way to very clearly channel the stories being told. Because I think a lot of people are incredibly brilliant and will rattle off all of these like facts and logistics and all of that. And that's just like not how my picture book brain works.
Yeah.
And so I think that I've found a language that really sort of translates the intricacies of what's happening up there into stories that we can hold in our hearts and in our spirits and in our minds as well. But so yeah.
I love that. Astrologist.
Astrologist. Yeah. That's not the correct title. So I'm like, I can't. It's no.
That's really stupid.
I find that so fucking misogynist. And this is a whole, as we get into a whole other tangent of just like not taking certain things seriously that not cis men like to take seriously. You know what I mean? It's like, do your research on how to properly title this career. So it's like,
right. I know, that's so annoying. Jordan, I don't really know where to begin except that we're like a couple weeks into 2022 and I can't wait to hear what you have to say because I feel like this year is this is based on nothing. So I'm saying this before you tell us what it is.
It's not nothing. Curious. It's your intuition, my friend.
It's my intuition. But I feel like this year is like a portal into like something that we've been like standing in the doorway of since like 2020 or 2019. And it feels like this is something bigger this year, and not in the way that every year it's like, this is our year. I don't know if it's our year, but we're going somewhere else this year, I feel like.
Listen, leave it to the Aquarius or the Aquarians to sort of lay out the pathway into the future. You're really feeling into it in a pretty profound way. Yeah. So first and foremost, we are recording this under a full moon, or the moon will be exactly full at 3:49 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So just keep your feels out. It's a Cancer full moon. And I will say, under this full moon, I am so grumpy. It's just like big emotional energy. So that is what is sort of permeating this this recording, though I'm gonna not be grumpy towards you. We're gonna
it's okay.
I'll bottle that up and displace it elsewhere after this. No. Okay, so 2021 started, obviously, but it was a strange start because we moved into the new year while Venus was still moving backwards in the sky. So Venus started a retrograde period at the end of December, or December 19th, and has been traveling backwards through the sign of Capricorn since. So we're still in that retrograde. And just to kind of amplify that like kind of stop-start energy. It's like we started something new, but we're still in this space of like reflecting on the past.
Yeah.
So we started anew with our eyes facing backwards. So just to kind of reiterate that like backwards orientation, Mercury just went retrograde too in the sign of Aquarius. And so we're working with two really impactful planets that are calling us backwards, that are calling us inwards and downwards, which, just kind of leaves us being like, it's 2022, but,
hasn't started yet.
Exactly. And so to me, the start of 2022 as we feel it, something new unfolding, I think will feel a little bit more present come February, because Venus ends her retrograde on the 29th, and then Mercury will end its retrograde a little bit into February, but still, I think that the forward motion will begin then. So if you're not really feeling renewed, that's okay. That's definitely okay.
Yeah, I feel like it's a very collective experience. Like a lot of my family and like people that I talk to, they're just like, I don't know what's going on. I feel like I'm walking through mud right now. Like that's just like the repetitive statement I've been hearing a lot.
Yeah, there is especially with Venus's retrograde happening in Capricorn, there is sort of like an undercurrent of like somberness or
Yes.
soberness. Like we're really seeing things for what they are, which, considering the state of everything, can really kind of bring you down.
Yeah, you your goggles back on. You're like, no.
Yeah. But looking into 2020, past January, I really feel like this is a pivotal year in a lot of ways, in a lot of different capacities. So some of the themes that the two major themes that I pick up on are rebuilding and stabilizing. And I do think that those words, like in a vacuum, are a little bit misleading because they feel very grounding when I actually think we're stabilizing on very like rocky ground. It's not like we're landing home and like normal life can resume. If anything, we're rebuilding in the face of change, in the face of necessary upheaval.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, we have no choice but to use this plot of land that is, you know, not level, and it has all of these obstacles to build on, and yet we still must build. We still must lay a foundation and make a home in this new landscape. What?
That sounds pretty positive, at least. You know, it sounds like
I mean, on an individual level, I take a positive approach to it because that's like who I am, you know? But we're working with collective energy, which also means that we're bearing the burden of the collective bullshit that is brought along with that. So I'll break that down a little bit more, the specifics of why I feel into that energy. But first and foremost, the vibe of 2022 is going to be vastly different than the vibe of 2021 and 2020. In a good or a bad way, I don't know. Who's to say?
Right.
But I think that it will be very apparent that the vibes are different. And the reason I say that is because at the end of 2021, Jupiter, the planet of abundance and opportunity and gift giving and trust, moved into his home of Pisces. Now, for the last 2 years, and we've talked about Jupiter before.
Yeah.
But for the last 2 years, just as a recap, Jupiter has been moving through signs that are ruled by Saturn. Saturn and Jupiter are sort of like our sky daddies. Jupiter is like cool casino daddy who's like a gambling addict. And like, you know, if you're going to drink, you can drink in my house. You know, it's that dad that like kind of lets you find the limits for yourself by like experiencing life. And then Saturn is like strict dad, is like, you can't leave the dinner table unless you've eaten your broccoli. You can't go out and play until your work is done. It's like, you know, that oppressive father energy. And so for the last 2 years, casino daddy has sort of been under the thumb of strict dad. And Saturn has been like, okay, well, if you're going to give gifts and abundance, they've got to come through challenge, tests, lessons.
Oh.
Because Saturn's like, we don't just give things away for free. Whereas Jupiter is sort of like, why? So
yeah,
for the last...
I resonate with that. Just in my personal life. I'm like, that happened.
Yeah, well, the last 2 years, we've been receiving abundance through what we can only really tap into as like hindsight. We can look back and be like, oh, that really hard thing I went through was the catalyst to bring me to where I am now. But like, it didn't feel like that in the moment. It felt like a hard situation in the moment.
Yeah.
So finally... Jupiter is back home in Pisces where he can like, you know, expand and enrich us through opportunities, trust, and gift giving, which just leaves us more. I mean, honestly, it is energy of hope. It is where we can find more room to breathe, room to unfurl. Like kind of like let our guard down for a minute, because everything's been so tense in the last number of years. It's been so sort of rigid, which is very Saturnian. And so for the majority of 2022, Jupiter will be floating through the sign of Pisces. Neptune, which is also in Pisces and has been for like about a decade, which is the planet of like spirit and creativity and imagination and sort of all things spiritual, all things intangible. With these two planets hanging out in Pisces, there is a huge call into trust and adapting in a way that finds acceptance for where we are. I think that this year will provide us that sort of, we've been in a space of like longing for normalcy, longing to go back to where we've been because that was comfortable. And I think now with Jupiter and Pisces, Pisces is a mutable sign, and the mutable signs are adaptable and they're changeable, but they're in their own way, they're sort of stabilizing because they give us the ability to sort of morph into our circumstances. You know, the water of Pisces is very malleable and it will fit into any container you put it in. And so now we're sort of stabilizing or settling into this new environment, for better or for worse. Because we had a taste of Jupiter and Pisces back in the summer. Jupiter dipped its toe into Pisces between May and July. And the day Jupiter moved into Pisces, the mask mandate was lifted. We, were able to sort of call in some of that hot girl summer energy. There was more activities, there was more physical touch. We were able to be closer to each other. But the very day that Jupiter moved out of Pisces back into Aquarius, masks were back on.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Like literally
the same day?
The day.
Did cases rise at the same time? Like, is
cases
just
rising? Well,
no more.
And we sort of had, back then, we sort of like found ourselves in this acceptance of like this new uplifted environment. But then we suffered the consequences of knowing that like we didn't have the infrastructure to support this new, entry into the world again, post being locked up at home. So I think that this is sort of like a two-pronged thing. We're stabilizing into the now with acceptance of like, okay, this is where we are, so we've got to work with what we've got. But I think that can also lead to a little bit of like delusion around the reality of like what we're living in. Because we, even just referring, like colloquially, we are referring to the time of now of like post-pandemic, which is objectively wrong. Like we are absolutely positively not post-pandemic. If anything, we've never seen the amount of cases that we are seeing now. And yet somehow we have this like glaze over when it comes to that sort of stark reality. And we're kind of looking onward and upward, like what is next, without really reconciling like what is right in front of us. So yes, hope met with a little bit of like delusion / avoidance.
It's interesting because you said this year, or with Jupiter now being able to freely give gifts and not have to learn lessons and negatives anymore, like or gain your gifts and negatives like the hard way. So it's gonna, like you said, we can lean into trust a little bit more. And so I'm wondering if there's going to be, so that can either lead to what you just said, like delusion, this like, oh, everything's great, or there could be like a hangover of the last couple of years where people are hesitant to trust and to like relax into receiving gifts and abundance. It's like, I don't know which way, probably just, it depends on the person and everyone's circumstances, but do you see like both things happening?
Well, yeah, because we are working with a sort of contrast of energy. We're working with all of this Pisces energy, with Jupiter there, with Neptune there, but then we still have Saturn in Aquarius. And we are sort of being pressed and pressured to, you know, build new structures and get really serious. And also like, I don't think we are going to see much shifting in the way of like equal opportunities to get out into the world, because like the separation between the vaccinated and non-vaccinated is like in the stars. Like Aquarius is a sign that rules medicine and rules advancements in medicine, which is why the vaccine has been able to roll out so quickly in this sort of like new Aquarian age. Medicine and technology are just working faster. And Saturn is a planet that separates. And that separation based on advancements in medicine and technology are very clear. And we have Saturn in Aquarius until July of 2023. And so I'm not sure how that separation will continue, but I see that the gap between those demographics continuing to kind of like continuing to be pulled further and further apart.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting because looking back to the summer, I'm like, I just felt into it. I was like, I know that this like fun of Jupiter and Pisces is going to land us with consequences, because Saturn is consequences. And I'm like, I don't know what those consequences will look like. And then
I remember you saying that.
Yeah. And now that I'm seeing, it's like you know, you can't, in Chicago, at least, you like can't go into any restaurant, even some stores without showing your vaccination card. And once that started happening, I was like, oh, that makes sense. that definitely makes sense as far as like how Saturn would sort of cage what is acceptable and like what is not.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense, because it's like it's almost like we abused the little bit of freedom that we had, you know, and then it's just like, no, you took it too far. Like,
yeah.
Did you guys ever read that book when you were a little kid, Give a Mouse a Cookie?
Yeah.
I loved that book. And it's like, if you give him a cookie, he's going to want milk. And then if he has milk, he's going to want, and it's just like, it snowballs into this, like, you give them one little thing and they're going to want the world. And it's like, that happened.
That's 100% it. That's 100% it. Because last summer when Casino Daddy was sort of able to be like, all right, kids, time to have a party. Let's have fun. Strict Dad, Saturn, was asleep. Saturn was retrograde during all of that time. So he wasn't awake and present to sort of lay down the law. It wasn't until October that he woke up and was like, look at this mess. Who's going to be responsible for cleaning up this mess? Exactly.
That's like, do you see, are there any like pivotal, I mean, obviously every transit and every, you know, there's new moons and full moons all year, but are there any that stand out to you, or any retrogrades or anything that you look at and you're like, that's some crazy, something's going to happen right there?
Okay. So, one eclipse season, which we'll get into in a minute, but another like major event, and this only happens every 13 years, is Jupiter and Neptune will meet in the sky. And this is incredibly powerful. And I don't think like in a very obvious way, but I think what that will allow us to do is to look back at 2022 and see it as a time that was pivotal for creativity, for media, for art. Because in the sign of Pisces, which is all about sort of like imagination and creativity and channeling our emotions into something beautiful for others to see, Jupiter expands everything it touches. And Jupiter sitting right on top of Neptune really opens a channel for us to pour our experience from the last 2.5 years into something outside of us, into something creative. And so I think the music that comes out of 2022, the movies, the art, any sort of creativity is so saturated with a collective experience that we've been through all together that I think will be incredibly powerful and in turn incredibly healing.
When are they meeting?
That happens April 8th. So we're not too far off.
Writing this down.
Yes.
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea.
I will say it isn't the most like grounding time. Like, I think around April 8th is where we are kind of like, on some level, sort of like removed from our bodies. It's like an out of body experience where we are so cracked open to all the intangibilities that exist, all the things that, you know, all the messaging from places that are larger than us. So it's definitely confusing, definitely extra sensitive, extra tender, but such a potent channel to allow something to be created out of all of this.
Yeah, that tracks though. It's like the best work comes from your most exposed and your most raw. So that I believe that 100%.
Yeah, and it was funny because one of the astrologers that I follow, one of my colleagues, her name's Eliza Kelly. She was. Yeah, she's the best. She was sort of like meditating on the energy of Jupiter in Pisces and the energy of Jupiter and Neptune, particularly. And she was like, it just reminds me of the Wizard of Oz. And so she looked at the chart of the Wizard of Oz, and the Wizard of Oz was like put out when Jupiter was in Pisces.
No way. That's so random.
And so it is this sort of like new reality, which can sort of infuse into our understanding of like our reality, or it can pull us away from what we're actually working with. So I'm not sure exactly how collectively we will land on that.
Right.
But it is this sort of like, it can deepen our understanding. It can bring sacredness to our understanding of life itself, or it can kind of catapult us to another sort of dreamscape.
Wow. That's a very specific connection that she made with that.
I know. So do you encourage people to kind of go into that expression mode? Because I remember
100%.
Yeah, you told me that last year. Like I remember it's one of the things, like expression was big for me.
You did it.
It was the most that I ever did with its expression last year in different mediums. But so I would listen to Jordan, y'all.
Yeah. Listen to Jordan, y'all.
I would listen to Jordan. That's like, yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no. Go on.
Oh, well, I guess that's kind of what you just asked, actually, Alyssa. But I'm like, as you're going through the year and describing these things, like what tools maybe we could, like, what's to be done about it, you know, except for in the vague sense, because every individual is different.
The first thing I think of, and like, as I'm like taking in that question, I'm like getting full body chills. And so, the first thing I think of when I'm thinking about Jupiter and Pisces and how we can find meaning, Jupiter is meaning. Like, what does it all mean beyond the mundane? That's Jupiter. And what I'm thinking is, and this is so vague, so take it as you will, but like the medicine of this year is poetry. Is like,
oh, I love that.
And you know, and maybe it's not exactly poetry, but it is that sort of heightened expression of what we are looking at. Like when a poet writes about a river, they're not writing about the river, but then they're writing from you know what I mean? It's like holistic view, this very sort of heightened and sacred expression of our current circumstances collectively and individually. And so I think when in doubt, finding trust in the poetry of it all. And I will say, I will say with Jupiter and Pisces, because, okay, so Jupiter and Pisces will be from now until May, and then Jupiter dips into Aries from May to October. Oh, so while Jupiter's in Pisces, it's really all about like trust in the process, trust in yourself, know that you are held by something larger than you, and that there is this sort of divine unfolding happening that we're sort of meant to kind of ride the ride of. And then with Jupiter and Aries, Aries is impulsive and fiery. And with Jupiter there, just do the thing. Which is also to say, it's about doing the thing and risking that you don't know what's going to happen when you know, barrel into action or barrel towards your impulses or your desires. I think a lot of this year also is sort of testing our failure intolerance, testing the areas where we hold fear that have created patterns of like risk aversion, because we're in such a achievement focused culture. You know, our world is really crafted in the image of Capricorn, and Capricorn is all about like climb the ranks and don't let them see the process. You know, don't let them see. Capitalist. it is capitalist. But it's all about sort of like the highest achieving and meeting all of your marks and gaining success.
And hiding the struggle. Exactly.
And all of that is to avoid failure, whatever that means. But with Jupiter being, you know, cool, chill, fun dad, Jupiter's like, what is this failure? Because if you leap off the cliff at the best case scenario, you reach your ideals. The worst case scenario, you fall and you have an incredible story to tell. The next party you go to, you know, you have this, it becomes an opportunity to grow. It becomes an opportunity to see, okay, that thing didn't work. So now I know not to do that. So I can do this other thing. And with Jupiter in Aries from May to October, we are supported in doing the thing and honoring our impulses by receiving beginner's luck. Like nothing is more textbook than Jupiter and Aries than beginner's luck. It does not mean that luck is sustainable, because Aries is sort of that flamethrower energy. So it's that beginner's luck, but then you've got to support it with something. But this year, both Pisces and Aries are signs that are not so concerned with like, how will it appear to others? You know, how does it satisfy the expectations that people have of me?
Right.
So I keep telling everyone I talk to, I'm like, if there was ever anything that you've been sitting on as far as like wanting to try something, wanting to do something, wanting to pursue something, this is the year to try it and not think twice about what will happen on the other end, because you can't possibly know that. And ruminating on, you know, what the outcome will be is a really quick way to stop you in your tracks. Because the reality of the situation is you don't know and you can't know and you're not meant to know. So investing in the process and allowing that to be a journey and an adventure. And you can take the perspective on as being just as curious as anyone else to find out where it takes you.
And if, you know, these past couple of years have taught you anything, it's that, you know, tomorrow isn't granted, you know, it's a very unstable time. Why not trust stars in this and do what you want to do? That's great.
Yeah. Because true stability, the way that we know it to be, that sort of like, I don't know why I'm thinking about the 90s as like a stable time, but probably because we were kids, you know, and we weren't really exposed to like what was actually happening, but like that bliss of the comfortable 90s where like everyone was in their jelly shoes and like, I don't know, take that. Yeah, take that as you will. But yeah, exactly. Yes. And the reason I say that is because let's move on to the nodes. So where the eclipses will fall this year. And I know that we've talked about the nodes in the past because the nodes shifting into Gemini and Sagittarius was the catalyst for this sort of call to learn about the reality of our social experience. It was, it coincided with the death of George Floyd, which ignited this huge, huge avenue for learning, for us all to learn about the experience of other people, and like how what we see from our vantage point is not a consistent perspective. So on the 19th, so it'll be after the nodes will already shift when this episode comes out. The nodes are moving into Taurus and Scorpio. And Taurus is a sign that is all about stability and sort of being anchored and rooted. But Uranus, the planet of change and upheaval, has been moving through Taurus since the spring of 2018. So what is stable is not actually stable. It's kind of like
every Taurus I know.
yeah. It's just like coming into... It's
You're
that
right.
sort of coming into stability on unstable ground. And also rebuilding a sense of security and stability in this new environment. So the themes of the nodes in Taurus and Scorpio are really about like relating to the world around us. Taurus is all about like what is important, what is valuable. It has to do with wealth. It has to do with the environment. And it has to do with sort of, like I said, stability. But as we are finding this upheaval, it is about really like opening up to our values collectively changing, like our attitudes around what is important, our attitudes around money and like what that looks like. I have a feeling in 18 months from now, at the end of this nodal transit, the way that we relate to wealth and what that means to us all is going to be very different. I think it will also be a time where the condition of the planet cannot be ignored. I think that we are going to see a lot of very, very intense and chaotic, like natural disasters, or sort of like, you know, the evidence of climate change where we can't look away. And yeah, things are changing. And it's interesting because they're changing in the sign that is least open to change. And so what we are moving into is going to be incredibly uncomfortable. And so getting comfortable with discomfort is also part of that journey. And then
that's like the nodes, do they work? So this, like you said, what we're moving into, meaning in the years to come or just this year?
It's 18 months.
Oh, that's what you said. Okay.
Yeah. So the North Node moved into Gemini June or the end of May of 2020, and now is moving into Taurus in January of 2022. So it's an 18-month period. And we'll really feel these themes come to life in like April, May of this year, which will be eclipse season, and then October, November, which will really give us a taste of like what these eclipses are here to pivot us away from or pivot us into.
Yeah. So 2 eclipse seasons, right? The spring and the fall?
3 eclipse seasons, but the next one is going to be 2023.
Oh, okay. So in the spring eclipse season, that's what is to be expected.
Yeah, just like an sort of intensified well of these themes, but they're going to sort of permeate the collective all year long. So the North Node is always what we're calling in. It's what we're moving into. So like I said, attitudes around money changing, our value system changing, our relationship to the planet changing, the structures that we build for what is secure and what is safe and what is comfortable is changing. So much is changing. And what we are moving away from is the South Node. And the South Node will be moving through Scorpio. And wherever the South Node is, we are meant to let go of that energy. It is energy of the past that no longer serves the trajectory of the future. But what tends to happen is we see a very loud shadow of that energy. So for example, the South Node has been moving through Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is all about righteous beliefs. Thou shalt not kill. That's a Sagittarian belief. And how that Sagittarian energy is balanced or channeled is through Gemini. So like my favorite example, I feel like I've said this before, but Sagittarius stands on high and goes, thou shalt not kill. And Gemini raises its hand and goes, yeah, but what about self-defense? Like Gemini asks us about, what about context? What about nuance? What about, the complexities of, each little thing.
Life.
But we were really hearing and seeing the impact of the shadow of Sagittarius. And one example that I think of is all of the legislation around abortion. And all of these restrictions and limitations and strongholds on old, outdated beliefs that no longer have a place in the collective. And yet that shadow still bubbles up. Yeah. That sort of stronghold of wanting to...
Like the last stand,
vestiges.
Like the last grasp. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So what we're seeing, or what the potential of moving into Scorpio is power. Like... It's all about the systems of power and how we are psychologically beholden or psychologically conditioned to work within those systems. Like Scorpio energy sort of reminds me of like, in movies and stuff, there's like an all-powerful witch and she like I love a witch, so don't get me wrong, but it's like that all-powerful witch that's like, sitting on her witch throne and has some, little assistant or whatever. Mm-hmm. And what she wants, she sort of possesses her assistant to go out and do for her. That's Scorpio. It's like the manipulation that takes place to make other people follow through with getting your desires met. And with that, it's also sort of breaking patterns of how we have been psychologically locked into or possessed by the structures of power that keep us feeling powerless. Mm-hmm. Because with this shift into Taurus and Scorpio, it really is like the systems of power are changing. Like the people who sit on high and have subtly and invisibly conducted, the ways in which we are and are not allowed to be, are
invisibly.
Subject. Yeah, it's all these, it's like being pulled by invisible strings. Yeah. And that sort of, I believe it will look like that sort of invisibility might be lifted and we're sort of able to see like, oh, this has been what has been, pushing and pulling and sort of setting out the undercurrent of what we're moving through. Because while that is happening, we are also entering, we're not entering yet, but Pluto, which is the planet of power, is in the very last degrees of Capricorn. And Pluto moved into Capricorn in 2008 and will move into Aquarius in 2024. So Pluto moves very slowly. Okay. But Pluto being power in Capricorn, like in a very textbook way, is like power of the hierarchy, power of government, corporations. Pluto has not been in Aquarius for like 200 years.
And that's an election year.
All right.
Yeah. And Pluto in Aquarius, in a textbook, non-nuanced sort of way, is power to the people. But also, Aquarius is not just the people, but it also includes like the margins.
I thought you were going to say, I was thinking aliens, and then I thought you said Martians.
I mean, maybe. Because Aquarius is the aliens. Aquarius is the aliens. You know, that's not nothing.
That's not nothing.
Let's circle back in 2020. Let's schedule a day for 2024. We could talk a little bit deeper about that.
Oh, yeah. We're going to need to.
Power to the aliens. I'm going to think about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we are going through this series of shifting. Ideally, we, in the next 18 months, are sort of able to identify the strongholds that have been placed on us by the powers that be, and what those sort of invisible tugs are sort of coming from, so that we can maybe cut some of those loose. But what we find with the shadow of it all is like intense manipulation and secrets. Like Scorpio, I always say every Scorpio's got a secret, and we're working with Scorpio energy. So there is a lot that is not going to be revealed, that I feel like once the nodes move out of Taurus and Scorpio, into Libra and into Aries and Libra, is when, we will probably learn a whole lot of what has been like living under the surface, and sort of like kept in I'm thinking about like a secret society, which could be scary, but also I think that there will be a lot that we will not know until 18 months from now. Yeah. But that being said, it really is a time to be, I think, empowered on a collective level, and recognize the ways in which you have been made to be powerless, so that you can transform that powerlessness into empowerment.
Wow.
And to always question things and understand that there's more than what your eye can see. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, and to be more open.
No.
Right.
Well, and that's what this last transit of Gemini and Sagittarius taught us. We have learned in the last 18 months to think critically. That has been the general lesson. So we are already going into this period of stabilizing, but changing and upheaval, and, sort of like a sort of new orientation of things from a place of eyes wide open, ears wide open, why, what, how, when, questioning. And so continuing to keep those questions alive, because it is important as we are building the foundation of into the future, into like what is next. We need to do it mindfully and intentionally, because we're setting ourselves up for the future.
Yeah. That's like, and the fall. So I know there's 3 eclipse seasons, but one is 2023. So the second one of this year is in the fall, right? And that's when, like, is that the last, maybe, I don't know if last, but like big shift that you feel for this year?
No, because the eclipses will carry on into 2023. The way that I felt the eclipse seasons happening, because there are 3 of them, they're told in 3 parts. So the first one presents the themes. The second one revisits the themes from another vantage point. And then the third one sets up the finale. So I think when we do our next next episode at the end, whenever that is, we'll have more of an understanding of what the story being told through the nodes are. But the thing about the nodes is it's all conjecture until we get there, because the nodes are soul energy. And they are unpredictable. They are truly we can't pin them down. The second you think you know what will happen, you get an ego check, because the circumstances of the nodes have no regard for your ego, have no regard for the comfort of what you want to happen, and thus the story that you wrap around something. That's our ego trying to grasp some sort of control by having a story of what will happen. It's what we do individually. You know, our ego, you were born and our ego is like, okay, I am Jordan. I am this. I have to do this in order to satisfy that. And then, you know, something like a nodal transit happens, or some soul level astrological event happens, and you are sort of like sideswiped, because your soul is like, cute story you've been telling, but like, that's not it. And so that happens during eclipses on a personal and a collective level. They are cosmic course correctors. And we are currently being course corrected in the areas of Taurus and Scorpio. But
and then individual readings of people. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
If people do an individual reading with you, obviously, then you break it down into their personal chart and where they are specifically being course corrected. And it could be different signs, obviously.
It depends on everyone's chart and how the eclipses or how the nodal transits will show up for them. Some nodal transits are much more personal and visceral than others. For example, when Gemini and Sagittarius, when that axis was being illuminated, because, well, also for you, Alyssa, because you're Gemini rising. So Alyssa and I, for the last 18 months, like, have, for lack of a better word, changed.
Yes.
Like who we are now. I keep saying, I feel like you'll resonate with me. I keep saying that if I had a lunch date with me from April of 2022, that version of me would be very surprised to see where I am now and who I am now.
Wait, you in 2020, you mean?
Me from April, just April 2020, had a lunch date with me now. Oh my God. Literally would be, we would be like, how did this happen? But then again, like, moving forward into this nodal transit, Alyssa and I will have much less of an understanding of what this eclipse is bringing for us until afterwards, because the North Node in Taurus moves into our 12th house, and the 12th house we can't see. It's a subconscious place. So it really depends on your chart and where the nodes are moving to see what it is bringing to life for you, and where it is sort of pivoting you and course correcting you. It's all very individual.
Yeah.
Gosh,
I need a reading.
Yeah, same. And by after, you mean like after the third eclipse?
After the 18 months.
After the 18 months.
Yeah.
Great.
Wow.
And then, so in the fall, the thing that I'm really feeling into is we have a Mars retrograde. And Mars will be retrograding in the sign of Gemini, and will be retrograde for a long time, like from the end of October into January. Mars retrogrades are when Mars, the planet of action and impulse and forward motion, goes to sleep. And
that's weird, because you said October, Jupiter in Aries, May through October is like the take action, and then October starts the Mars retrograde, and you should... Is it like not beneficial to try to take action, or you're just going to be swimming upstream?
You know, it really is individual in that case. But more than anything, with Mars retrograde, we are really called into question why we move in the way we do, and where are we moving to, and who is telling us to do so. Like Mars in Gemini. Gemini is a very curious, very cerebral, very perceptive sign. And I think what this Mars retrograde will offer us is a lot of questions, and will also call us into a little bit more intention around the ways in which we act on autopilot. So like where we go through the motions, I think will become a lot more difficult because we don't have the answers we need to support why we do this thing.
You're just being tested and like called to check yourself and unpack your shit, essentially.
Yeah. Well, because Mars in Gemini, like people with Mars in Gemini, or when Mars is in Gemini, there is sometimes like a carelessness. Because Gemini is like very curious and very quick and likes to kind of dip its toe into everything and likes to try everything. Follow through is like really difficult with a Gemini because it's not about that. Gemini is just like wants to taste everything. And so I think it will be a time where we might be like lacking some of that, like the burst of curiosity, the motivation to like do new things might feel a little bit heavier. I think that we will probably feel weighted down. That is usually what happens during a Mars retrograde, where we're kind of called to slow down, which is difficult because Gemini energy, like the biggest offense to Gemini is boredom. And I think part of working with the challenge of this Mars retrograde is to embrace boredom so that we are not just moving for the sake of moving or doing for the sake of doing. Because if we are, then we are often influenced by the voices of the systems and the structures at large to satisfy the supposed tos and to satisfy the expected. And so, you know what it reminds me of? And this just came to me, but my acting teacher, since I was 12 years old, as like a little Shakespearean actor, would yell at us during like rehearsal and be like, don't just, wait, oh, now I forgot it. It's like, don't just, it's essentially like, don't just move, stand there. Like, don't just move for the sake of moving. Yeah, be intentional and have a purpose, have a reason. And so I think it's calling us into question, like our reasoning for our decisions, our reasoning for taking steps forward, through like probably imposing quite a bit of slowness and boredom, because that is, you know, not the natural state for Mars or Gemini, but
that sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, the antithesis of Capricorn energy. So I wonder if Capricorns are going to struggle during that time because they're just so like, let's go to that. Let's move that goalpost. Let's figure this out. Let's do it.
Well, it's
Taurus,
interesting.
right?
It's interesting because, well, Taurus is like kind of happy in that place of like just even keeled, like chill. Taurus loves chill, but you're right in a lot of ways. The opposite sign to Gemini is Sagittarius. But astrology teaches us that opposites are not like opposite in the way that we think about it. Opposites are two sides of the same coin. They're both,
like
they both have this, exactly. They have the same goal, but they go about it different ways. Whereas Gemini and Capricorn have no relation to each other. There are places in the sky that are blind spots. And to Gemini, Capricorn is a blind spot, which means that their energy is very juxtaposed. Because Gemini is like, let's explore, like, let's try things, let's experiment, like, let's just see what's going on. Can be very surface, is not that serious, is just like wants to learn, wants to like do new things. Whereas Capricorn is like, but failure and achievement and goals and building and the plan. And Gemini's like, I don't fucking care. Like, and so, yeah.
Interesting. What's the blind spot for Aquarius then?
Cancer is a blind spot for Aquarius. So it's Cancer and Virgo.
Hmm.
So Aquarius from the sky cannot see the energy of Cancer or Virgo. And so the way that that manifests for us, even though your mood is in Virgo, so it's a little bit, or your rising's Virgo, so it's a little bit different. But Aquarius is very sort of big picture, detached, takes a very sort of like scientific view of things, wants, you know, more about the information than the emotional attachment to things, whereas Cancer is emotional attachment. It's like that little crab that gets things in its pincers, in its little claws, and it's like, I'm holding on to you. There's like there's an emotional component of that Aquarius does not quite reach unless prompted. And then the Virgo of it all is like the organization and the linear sort of like system of things. Also, Virgo is a mutable, adaptable sign, and Aquarius is fixed as fuck. Aquarius is sort of like immovable from its perspective from space. You know, Aquarius is like, I'm up here where the big picture is clear, and like I don't want to get bogged down in the little details, where Virgo is the little details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is okay. So I feel like after listening to all of this, it's like it's gonna be. It sounds like a very intense year, but not in a like all negative, heavy intense. Like it sounds like there's also a really expansive intensity, which is good and positive, mixed in with really emotional, sensitive intensity of like having to reflect and examine the why of what we do, but it's mixed in with enough like abundance and gifts that maybe it'll feel lighter than before. Yeah, creativity.
Yeah, so much creativity, so much more space to find meaning for all of this in a way that is like, you know, not so saturated with stark reality, but also making sure that we are staying grounded enough to not lose ourselves in escapism or delusion or our own sort of like imaginary world. But I think instead sort of like bringing some of that to us. Because it can all exist simultaneously. I feel like this year really is like an amalgamation of so many contrasting energies, which I think will make for a really dynamic year. I don't know that it will necessarily be easier than the years before, but I know that it will be very different.
Yeah.
And I think if anything, like allowing yourself to be flexible is also part of this year, because we do have this like big clashing energy of fixed signs. So with Saturn in Aquarius and then the nodes in Taurus and Scorpio, like just be aware that I think Leo season, so like end of July into end of October, is going to be really crunchy, because we got all of this fixed energy sort of like slamming against each other, creating all of this friction and creating all of this tension. But I think part of working with that is like finding it within ourselves to be flexible, to find enough trust to go with the flow, so that we don't get so caught up in the tenseness of that time particularly, but it's permeating the entire year. So when in doubt, adapt, flexibility, flow, and surrender.
Yeah.
It sounds like a whole year of just like focusing on your intuition and yourself. I mean, from what you were saying about like Jupiter and Pisces and like trusting the process and trusting in yourself, all the way through what you just were describing in the fall, where it's like we have to kind of reflect on ourselves. It's like really just as much as stuff is shifting outward, it seems like a big time for everyone to just like keep a finger on your own pulse and not just like drift too far from yourself this year.
Yeah, I think part of it too, because in previous years we were working with a lot of like Capricorn energy, which, usually manifests in feeling like very pressured to meet the status quo. But we're moving away from some of that Capricorn energy, especially once Venus is done with her retrograde at the end of this month. But I think part of this year, it also is about like tuning into yourself, but not making it about you necessarily. Like, yes, I believe that, you know, saying that is so prevalent now that like you are the main character of your story. Yes. But reminding yourself and remembering that your story is parallel with millions, billions of other story. It's not just your story being told. And so tending to you. And if there was ever a time to like lean into self-care for collective care, this is now. Like everything is so much bigger than just us, just me, just you. And so getting clear on like what you're bringing to the table so that you can offer it with confidence.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, me too.
I feel like I don't know what's about to happen, but I'm looking forward to this year, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, why not, right?
But I like what you know. I'm looking forward to every year.
It's gonna happen anyway. Might as well,
yeah, exactly.
You know, get excited about it if you can.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Jordan. We tend to just like reach out to you during the obviously top and bottom of the year is great, but I feel like we tend to do like a summer or spring check-in with you too, because stuff starts to play out
where we get that different vantage point of the theme. Could be a good time to kind of being like,
come find me. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, maybe we do like post-eclipse season so we can like look back and be like, whoa.
Yeah. And I have like a whole thing I've written down this whole conversation. So, I mean, obviously it's recorded, but then we can just like check back on it. I don't know, because you're never wrong. So
well, I don't know about that. That's a lot of pressure.
I mean, I do. I've known you since we were like 18, so I can say that.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. And also, Jordan's birthday is this week, everybody. When you're listening to this, she will have just had it.
Yeah.
So, his birthday is coming up.
Yes.
We're like a week apart.
Yeah.
Jordan, the 21st. I'm the 27th. But happy birthday.
Thank you. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to keep going. Yeah. But I love you, Jordan. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon. Oh my gosh, I needed that. I wrote down a lot.
I know you did. I think that's good. I want to like steal if you want to take a pic or something. Yeah, I hope everyone else was writing some stuff down, because there's some important dates, some important transits, eclipse coming up that we need to take into account if you're feeling in a weird place. That's why.
Yeah, just like, I love talking to her because her interpretations are, you know, she doesn't pretend to be a psychic or anything like that, or tell, you know, she'll just say, I see this energy. I don't know how it's going to come about. So it's very much like, but like we have said, it's always eerily accurate when time passes and we look back at what she said and we're like, wow, that was pretty spot on in our personal lives and in the collective. She's in it.
And we have to reiterate too, like you should book her for a personal one-on-one so she can read your chart and see what this year has in store for you specifically. You can reach out to her on her Instagram at Jordan Shomer. Is there a dot in there?
No, on Instagram.
Okay, perfect. Not. At Jordan Shomer. Please reach out to her. Reach out to us if you know, all else fails, and we'll get you in contact with her.
Yes.
But yeah, we love her. Shout out to Jordan. Shout out to Black Lives Matter. Shout out to Planned Parenthood. Shout out to us.
Shout out to us. And this year, like, listen, guys, we're coming in new energy. You know, we're gonna have we have some really fire guests lined up already. We're gonna get our merch popping this year.
Yes.
Our Patreon's gonna expand. It's gonna be It's going to be good. So stay tuned. Thank you for sticking with us. Please continue to rate and review us on Google, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. Reviewing and rating on Apple Podcasts really helps us in the algorithm so more people can find us.
Yep.
And, if we have an episode that really resonates with you, please share it with someone you love or someone that you think might benefit from it.
Yeah.
Tag us on Instagram, whatever. Just engage, be our friends. We want to.
Yeah, we're on YouTube too. So don't forget, SOS with Molly and Alyssa. Subscribe to us. You can see our pretty faces. We put some work into ourselves, so we want you to see us, please. And Instagram at the SOS Pod. Follow us, subscribe, all that good stuff. We love you.
Yes, I'm Molly Cottrell.
I'm Alyssa Rosano.
And here's to turning meltdown
into magic.